Serious. What's the creepiest, most unexplainable thing that happened to you? I was 12, and had just gotten my first mobile phone. One weekend, I get a call from an older-sounding man with an Australian accent. Not that weird, I live in Australia, but kind of relevant. He asks, "Is this my first and last name?" I go, "Yes." He takes a deep breath, sounds really emotional, and says, "I'm your grandpa." All I could say was, "No, you're not." Both my grandfathers have been dead for years by that point, plus they were both European. I'm first-generation Australian. There's no way that even if one of my grandmas had been getting side action, that this guy was my grandpa. He sounded disappointed and hung up. Haunts me to this day. Our family cat passed away when I was 14, and it really sucked. He was a great cat. Fast forward to 16 years old, and I'm sitting by my mom on the couch, and she's showing me something on Facebook on her iPad when I swear I saw a cat out of the corner of my eye. So I look up, and it's our old cat walking into the kitchen, rubbing his tail against the wall as he made the corner as he always did. My mom also looked up just after me and stared and looked back at me, and I was like, "Did you just see our old cat?" She replied, "Yeah, he just went around the corner there." I got up and went and looked in the kitchen, and he's nowhere to be found. 10 years later, my mom and I still talk about how creepy that was that we both saw it. My brother passed away in 2008. Fast forward to 2016. I was asleep, and I had a dream about him, as I often did since he passed away. This dream was different. It was like he was talking directly to me, looking straight in my eyes. In the dream, I asked him, "Is it really you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Prove it." He then reached out and touched me on the arm, and when he did, I jolted up in bed, wide awake, covered in sweat. I thought all this was really strange, and I went to the bathroom to put some water on my face. As I was looking in the mirror, I saw that there was a backwards R written on my arm in pen, exactly where he touched me in the dream. The letter R was the first letter of his name. There were no pens in my bedroom, and I've never sleepwalked before. You can call me crazy, or lying, or whatever, but that was the single most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. Every time my mother cooks a specific dessert, an earthquake happens in Chile. That only happened twice between 2015 and 2016. Strangely, the two earthquakes had almost the same magnitude. Was giving my then 2, maybe 3-year-old daughter a bath when staying in an old house, holiday rental. We had play cups, saucers, and a teapot which she was filling up with the bathwater and pouring into the cups. "This one is for you, Daddy, this one is for me, and this one is for the old lady in the doorway." No one there. I had a dream a few weeks ago. Bad times in my life, right on the cusp of things getting much better. They are now, and I was sleeping badly and just not mentally well. My favorite uncle, closest thing I had to a dad growing up, actual dad was not good at dadding, died suddenly of a heart attack a few years ago. It was abrupt and shocked everyone. I was across the country and distraught by the news. He was by far the closest of any of my family members. I was dreaming about something irrelevant to him or anything, and suddenly I turned around and there he was, just standing there holding his arms out and grinning like, "Hey!" I just lost sense of the dream immediately. I was so thrilled to see him, like the dream was a work assignment, and he was just showing up to break the monotony. I jumped into his arms and hugged him and kept telling him how happy I was to see him. The rest of that dream, he just hung out with me. I was just so happy. I've never had an experience like that because, honestly, I've always been the aloof black sheep in my family, and I never imagined anyone would care to visit me after they died of all people, if such a thing is possible. But there he was, and it will stick with me always that maybe he just came to say what's up and give me a little slap on the shoulder and make sure I kept on trucking because better stuff was coming. I miss him. My parents and brother were out. He was meeting his friends and my parents were somewhere. I can't remember, LOL. Fast forward a couple hours later or so. It's dark now, whoopee, and I hear something downstairs, a thud. Then I hear a flipping, "Hello." No one was home except me. I go to the landing at the top of the stairs and say, "Hello?" thinking it was my brother coming home as he rode his bike and would put it in the garden shed and come through the back door. I get nothing in return. My brother likes to scare me a lot around the house, so I start thinking, it's him. He's going to scare me in 3, 2, 1. Nothing. I go down 2 stairs and say, "Hello?" peering over the banister to see if I can see my brother hiding, waiting for me to come downstairs. Nothing. He came home an hour or so after that happened, and my parents came home about 10 or so minutes after my brother did. To this day, I still have no clue on what the hell said hello. This actually just happened last week. I've been traveling for work a lot recently, and as such I stay in hotels. Not extraordinary, nor are they hellholes, just regular generic hotels. Well, the one I was at last week had an elevator that was annoyingly slow. Everything it did was slow. Whether it was coming to your floor, opening or closing of the doors, all took what felt like forever. I'm leaving the hotel to go to the gym, and as I approached the elevator, I saw a little girl standing in the elevator. Assume little girl, just saw a short figure with long hair. Didn't catch the face because the door was closing. I figured I'd give it a second. I didn't want to press the button and have the door stop closing and the little girl have to stand on an elevator with a big adult male she didn't know. I waited maybe 3 seconds after the door shut and then pressed the elevator button. The elevator that I saw the little girl standing in opened, and she was nowhere to be seen. I then took the stairs. One night, probably around 2 a.m., I was sleeping and dreaming. I can't remember the dream, but in the dream, it all of a sudden got quiet and everything became still. A voice in my dream comes out of nowhere and starts saying, "Wake up, go to Nicholas, my 3-year-old son room now. Wake up, wake up. AMI, my real name, wake up." I wake up and lay there for a few seconds, thinking how weird of a dream it was. I chalked it up to a crazy dream, but decided to go check on my kids. I head to Nicholas's room and open his door. He sleeps with a pretty bright nightlight and all the other lights off. When I opened the door, I saw a shadow figure standing at the foot of his bed. I immediately threw myself over my son and started screaming to the figure to go away. The shadow rushes to the window and hops out. I live in a trailer at the time. Our windows were double hung, the kind that slide up and down, and we had screens in all of them. This was during the summer, so I kept the windows open often. My husband works nights, so I scooped my son up and went to my daughter's shared room and locked the door. I called 911 and the police were there in like 10 minutes. What happened was my neighbor had a nephew staying the summer with him. The nephew was 18 and was going to be helping his uncles at his construction business. His uncle, my neighbor, and my husband sometimes share a beer or two and talk outside. My husband was telling the neighbor how he would be on night shift the next 2 weeks. His nephew overheard and chose to break in one of the nights he knew my husband was working. He swore to the cops and everyone else he only broke in to steal shit for his drug habit. He didn't have a record for harming children or nothing like that, so he may have been telling the truth about looking for money or shit to sell, but who knows. Another time, I was sleeping when the voice came again in my dream. Like the last time, everything in my dream went silent and still, and again I can't remember the dream. The voice comes again and says, wake up, Amy, go to Nova. Nova needs you. Nova is my daughter. She was 6 at the time. I woke up and immediately hauled ass to the girls' room. Before I even opened the door, I could hear her. Nova has severe asthma and has been hospitalized more times than I can count. I heard her wheezing and struggling to breathe. I turned the light on, grabbed her inhaler and a steroid that she has to take when her asthma gets bad, and screamed for my husband to call 911. He was home that night. The ambulance came and took her to the hospital. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low, so she was in the hospital for about a week. If I didn't get to her in time, she would have died. I haven't heard the voice since. I have no idea what it was. Maybe mother's intuition, maybe a subconscious thing, maybe a deceased family member or friend helping me out from the other side. Stayed in a luxurious resort in a small island with 3 of my friends when we were in high school. My friend's dad was the manager. This was a tiny island. You could walk around in less than a day, and there were only a few suites. Very exclusive, and it was far from the nearest town. At night, it would get really dark and peaceful. The staff there always talked about how they had strange or ghostly encounters throughout the years. FYI, this island was used as a camp or hiding place for soldiers back in the day. It still has the lighthouse they use that's over hundreds of years old. Anyway, our room had 2 king-size beds. In the middle of the night while everyone else was asleep, I woke up suddenly and felt extremely hot. I was sweating like crazy, even if the AC was on full blast and it was blowing straight at me. I felt something weird, like a presence next to my side of the bed. I never felt so scared in my entire life, but I was shaking and sweating profusely. But what was really crazy was that only one side of my body was hot. The one by the edge of the bed, the other was cold. I hid under the blanket and closed my eyes as hard as I could because I was afraid that if I opened it, I would see something. I felt the energy of that presence get closer to me, like we were face to face. I kept inching towards my friend who was sleeping next to me. After a while, it suddenly disappeared and I wasn't hot anymore. The next morning, I didn't mention it to anyone until they talked about how cold it was in the bedroom. They were freezing the whole night. Then I told them what I felt that night. My friend who slept beside me got really quiet. She told me not to freak out, but she woke up last night too, and she saw a girl standing next to my side of the bed and just stared right at me. I've never not believed in ghosts, but I also don't necessarily believe in them, if that makes sense. But I just can't explain that night. It was the first time I had experienced a feeling I just couldn't explain or shake off. Still bothers me to this day. I spend a lot of time in the woods and occasionally camp in the bed of my truck with a tarp tented over it. While this makes for great rain protection, I can't see out all the time. I was camping in Georgia, up in the Allegheny Mountains. It was foggy night, which isn't too uncommon, and I was laying in bed getting ready to go to sleep when a bunch of coyotes started howling and barking not too far away. This isn't too unusual, but I'm still not totally used to it. What happened next, though, is what was so creepy. Normally, when coyotes go off, it builds up and then dies off slowly. I heard a coyote yelp as if it had been injured, and it went dead silent. Then I heard a quiet crunch on the leaves as something got closer. Then the crunch of the stones as it got to where I was parked. Then it was silent. It was then that the distinct sound of a nail on my truck's side rang through my ears like nails on a chalkboard. Something was just feet from me, then nothing. It brushed my tarp, and that was the last of it. Silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I got out, and all I could find was a scratch on the side of my truck from the nails and a single coyote footprint. My guess is that a coyote hurt itself, which spooked them, and one came in close to check out the smells of my camp. But that night had to be one of the absolutely creepiest nights of my life. About 12 years ago, was sleeping on the bed beside my wife, who was awake and reading, pre-parent. Was just drifting into dream state when an entity made an appearance in my dream. The entity was jarringly at odds visually with the rest of the dream. Style and appearance was dazzling, solidly defined and detailed, making the rest of the dream appear to be a washed out of focus film being shown in the background. In fact, the out-of-placeness of the entity was so jarring it shocked me, flinchingly awake when it stared at me. My flinching caused my wife to ask me if I was okay. I don't know what compelled me to ask the following, but I asked her to close her eyes, clear her mind, and describe the first thing she saw. She described the entity to near perfection: physical appearance, headgear, color, facial expression, the lot. The most notable features being the construction style, but kinda not, hat, and the shimmering golden color. A few years ago, on a couple of occasions, my 2-year-old asked me and my wife who was the Goldie man with the hat standing behind Daddy. Not even a year ago, I had my friend over for a sleepover, and fast forward to like 2 a.m. We got bored, so we're outside just throwing paper airplanes we made. I threw mine and went out to get it, and all of a sudden just felt the most fear I had ever felt for no reason, and look over to my friend on the patio and watch a big orb just fly over him. Keep in mind, I did not know that orbs had stuff to do with the paranormal, but something inside me just told me that we had to get out of there. So in a low voice, I just had to go inside, and he was really confused because at this point, I was acting very scared and off. But I just raced to the front door and went in, and he followed, and we got to my room, and I told him what I saw, and for some reason, I started to have tears roll down my face for the first time in years. Thinking back on it, and I'm still very confused. I was 14 and my sister was 13. We lived in a town in Pennsylvania that doesn't really exist anymore. It was summer, hot, no air conditioning. This is maybe 3 years before my parents got central air. We had the windows open and the entire summer, like every summer. We lived near a creek and could hear it babbling if it rained really hard the day before. In the summer it was always low, and so we never heard it during those months, other than insects and cars driving down the interstate toward or away from the quarry mine. If you were on our property, you didn't hear much. It was not rural, but almost. There was a frosty freeze and 6 to 7 other shops about 2 miles away. My parents went out on a date and left my sister and I home. 2 young girls, but we had been left home for almost 3 to 4 years at this point. We were used to it. We cooked a pizza and were watching TV after our parents left. The phone rang just as we heard what sounded like a person somersault across the roof of our house. My sister answered the phone, but when she picked up, heard nothing but static. But not the usual static noises. She explained it like a slowed down static hum, like if a TV channel mixed with an egg beater on low. She said hello a few more times, listened to the egg beater static for a few more seconds, then hung up. We went back to watching TV and thought nothing of it. Maybe 40 minutes later, we hear footsteps on the roof. Very soft footsteps. I remember listening to almost 10 before looking at my sister, who was also looking at me with a white face in complete shock. Eventually, we came up with the nerve to get up and go outside and look. Just barely visible behind our large, already outdated TV antenna was a man lying face down on our roof. He was tall, skinny, and had huge white tennis shoes on. He was kind of an outline shape except for his shoes, which seemed to glow. My sister was spooked. I was crazy. I started to scream at the man. I threw a few small rocks and missed him terribly. He didn't move. My sister was tugging at me to get back inside. Finally, after I realized the man wasn't moving, I got freaked out and ran inside too. We huddled in my parents' room. Nothing for almost 20 minutes. It felt like 2 hours. Our parents weren't due home until midnight, and we had no way of reaching them in 1995. Then we hear a knocking sound, like the man is knocking on our roof, like it was a front door. I had had enough. I rush outside, dragging my sister, ready to confront this crazy person. We now see him lying face down on the first top line of the roof, his arms and feet dangling on either side of the lip. We freak, lock ourselves in the basement. Our parents find us in the morning. I pissed myself while sleeping. Never found out what it was about, and my dad thought we were lying.